It should have been just another Monday morning. Coffee, emails, a few polite nods in the hallway. Instead, the first words out of his mouth when we met were, "Nice painting. Too bad mine makes yours look like a motivational poster from the 90s. I should have hated him instantly. Honestly, maybe I did for about 5 seconds. But hate doesn't explain why I couldn't stop noticing the way his lips curved when he smirked. Or why my pulse skipped when he leaned on the doorway between our offices like he'd owned the place for years. His name was Ethan Carter, the new attorney who had moved into the office next to mine at the downtown firm in Chicago. Tall, annoyingly handsome, with blonde hair that refused to stay put and eyes the color of lake water in summer. He was supposed to be my colleague, maybe my competition, nothing more. Yet somehow, from that first ridiculous challenge about office wall decor, he had me completely off balance. I had spent years building a reputation here. No nonsense. Reliable. The guy who never let emotions cloud judgment. I had the framed diplomas, the perfect track record, and yes, the abstract painting on my office wall that I thought conveyed successful yet approachable. But then Ethan barged in with his easy grin and his oversized landscape canvas of a mountain range, like he was some kind of artistic pioneer. "Don't tell me you're intimidated," he said that first day, leaning against my desk, dangerously close to the edge where my coffee sat steaming. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, veins visible on his forearms, the faintest scar running across one wrist. "Because if this were a competition, I'd say you've already lost." "Funny," I replied, forcing calm into my voice even as my jaw clenched. I didn't realize interior design was part of litigation strategy. Must have missed that class in law school. He laughed loud, genuine, the kind that filled the space between us too easily. And damn it, something in my chest stirred. I told myself it was irritation. It wasn't. Days passed, and the so-called painting competition became the strangest ritual of my life. He'd pop into my office with critiques bold colors. "But does it say anything about you?" And I'd return the favor in his. We volleyed back and forth, insults sharpened like blades. But underneath them was an energy I couldn't ignore. At night, lying in bed staring at my ceiling fan, I'd replay his words. His smile. The way he looked at me, like I wasn't just another lawyer but something more. Something worth challenging. The office staff started to notice. One paralegal whispered, "Are they fighting or flirting?" As we passed in the hallway, both of us carrying files, both smirking like schoolboys with a secret. I told myself it was just rivalry. But rivalry doesn't explain why I bought a second painting. One I didn't even like, just because I wanted to see the way Ethan's eyebrows would lift when he saw it. It doesn't explain why I started timing my coffee breaks to his, why my heart hammered when our shoulders brushed in the copy room, or why I couldn't shake the thought of what his laugh would sound like if I kissed him instead of arguing. One Friday evening, long after most of the firm had gone home, I found him in his office, jacket draped over his chair, tie loosened, staring at his painting like it held answers. He didn't hear me at first. He looked God. He looked tired. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "You know," I said softly, leaning on his doorway the way he always did to me, "your painting still isn't that impressive." He glanced up, surprise flickering across his face, followed by that smile, the one that undid me every time. "And yet, here you are, still talking about it." We locked eyes. Silence stretched, thick with things neither of us dared say. My chest tightened. My carefully built walls, the ones that kept me professional, untouchable, began to crack. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, losing this competition wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. That was just the beginning. Because what started as a stupid game of one-upmanship was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about control. desire, and the price of vulnerability. And Ethan Carter, the man who hung a mountain on his wall and dared me to compete, was about to teach me how much deeper the heart could climb. The following week, things only got worse or better, depending on how you define torture. Ethan had started this new tradition of walking past my office every morning with his coffee, leaning casually against my doorframe, and throwing some backhanded compliment at me. "Morning, Daniel. Nice tie. Did you raid the clearance rack at Macy's? Or is that your courtroom intimidation look?" I'd grit my teeth, adjust the knot, and reply coolly, "At least my ties match my suits. You look like you lost a fight with a department store mannequin." He'd grin, sip his coffee, and walk away, leaving me simmering in a mix of annoyance and something that felt suspiciously like excitement. Colleagues started placing bets. Literal bets. I overheard two associates in the break room whispering about whether Ethan and I were secretly dating. "We're not," I snapped, grabbing my coffee. They exchanged glances. Then one muttered, "Could have fooled me." The truth was, I didn't know what we were. Rivals. Friends. Enemies with benefits of sarcasm. I only knew that every time I saw him, my pulse did something it had no business doing. One afternoon, while I was knee-deep in preparing for a deposition, Ethan knocked on my door. Without waiting for my answer, he strolled in, carrying a rolled-up canvas. "Before you say no," he began, "hear me out." I leaned back in my chair, arching an eyebrow. That phrase has never once preceded something good. He smirked. "I need your opinion." "You're joking." "Nope." He unrolled the canvas on my desk. It was a painting abstract, bold, almost chaotic in its brushstrokes. Red slashes cut across a storm of black and white. I stared at it longer than I meant to. It wasn't his usual polished landscape style. This one was raw, angry, honest. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. I opened my mouth to deflect with some sarcastic quip, but the words caught. Instead, I said, "It's intense." His gaze flicked to mine, searching. "Too much?" "No," I admitted. "It feels real." For the first time, he didn't grin or smirk. He just nodded, almost relieved, and rolled the canvas back up. "Thanks." He left without another word. That night, I lay awake replaying the look in his eyes. Vulnerable, almost pleading, like he wasn't just asking about paint on a canvas, but something deeper. And I hated myself for wanting to know what that something was. The next weekend, I ran into him outside of work, which should have been impossible in a city the size of Chicago. Yet there he was, at the same grocery store, standing in front of the cereal aisle, frowning at the shelves like the fate of the universe depended on choosing between Frosted Flakes and Cheerios. "Didn't peg you for a breakfast guy," I said, pushing my cart closer. He glanced up, startled, then grinned. "Daniel. Out in the wild. Didn't think lawyers bought groceries. Figured you survived on black coffee and courtroom adrenaline." Funny. I tossed a box of oatmeal into my cart. "And what about you? Let me guess, Lucky Charms." He held up a box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. "Clothes." Something about seeing him there, jeans, sneakers, a hoodie instead of his tailored suits made my chest tighten. He looked younger, softer, human in a way I hadn't allowed myself to imagine him. Before I knew it, we were walking out together, our bags in hand. The sidewalk was wet from earlier rain, neon lights reflecting in puddles. "Dinner?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "You have to eat, right? Unless you're rushing home to alphabetize your legal briefs." "I don't," I started to protest, but his grin was disarming. "Come on. One meal. No competition. No paintings. No courtroom egos. Just food. Against my better judgment, I said yes. The restaurant was a small Italian place on a corner. Warm light spilling out the windows. The scent of garlic and basil wrapping around us as we sat down. It felt dangerously like a date. We ordered wine. Talked about everything but work. He told me about growing up in Denver. About his younger sister who was an artist. About how he hated thunderstorms but loved the smell after rain. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Real laughter. Not the polite chuckles I usually gave colleagues. At one point, he leaned in, eyes glinting under the soft light. You know, you're not as uptight as everyone says. I rolled my eyes. Careful. Keep complimenting me like that and I might start liking you. God forbid. He murmured. But the way he looked at me steady, lingering made my pulse stutter. I excused myself to the restroom just to breathe. Splashing cold water on my face. I stared at my reflection. This was dangerous. Too dangerous. I had built my life on control. On not letting personal feelings bleed into professional spaces. Getting involved with Ethan would be reckless. So why did I feel like I was already falling? By the time we left the restaurant, it was pouring rain. Ethan laughed, tugging his hood up. Figures. Guess we're running for it. Before I could respond, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the downpour. We sprinted down the block, soaked within seconds, both of us laughing like idiots. When we finally ducked under an awning, breathless, dripping water onto the sidewalk, I looked at him, really looked. His hair plastered to his forehead, shirt clinging to his chest, eyes sparkling with adrenaline. And without thinking, I whispered, "You're impossible." He leaned closer, voice low, teasing but softer than usual. "But you like me anyway." I should have pushed him away, should have laughed it off. Instead, I froze because he was right. And for one dangerous second, standing in the rain, I wanted nothing more than to close the distance between us. But I didn't. I stepped back, cleared my throat, and muttered, "Good night, Ethan." The disappointment that flickered across his face nearly broke me. The following Monday, things shifted. Not in obvious ways, but enough that I noticed. Ethan didn't stop by my office that morning. Or the next. When I passed him in the hallway, he nodded politely but didn't smirk. Didn't tease. It shouldn't have bothered me. But the silence gnawed at me more than any of his jokes ever had. Finally, on Wednesday, I couldn't take it. I walked into his office unannounced. He looked up from his desk, startled. "Daniel." "We need to talk," I said. His jaw tightened. "About what?" "You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy." "Bullshit." His eyes flashed, the calm mask slipping. "What do you want me to say? That maybe I don't feel like being someone's punchline anymore? That maybe I thought last Friday meant something? But apparently I was wrong." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened. "Ethan, forget it," he muttered, turning back to his laptop. "We're colleagues. That's all we should be." But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because hearing him say that hurt more than it should have. And for the first time, I wondered if I was about to lose something I hadn't even admitted I wanted. I didn't sleep that night. His words replayed in my head on an endless loop, scraping against my ribs like broken glass. We're colleagues. That's all we should be. The problem was, it already wasn't true. By the next morning, I'd resolved to confront him again. But fate beat me to it. We were both assigned to the same Deposit Iona messy corporate fraud case involving a client who couldn't stop contradicting himself. Hours of combing through documents, prepping witnesses, exchanging notes, trapped in the same conference room for an entire day. It was torture. He kept his distance. His tone clipped. His jokes vanished. I tried to focus on the work, but every time he leaned over the table to grab a file, the scent of his cologne hit me. Every time his fingers brushed a page too close to mine, I felt it like a spark. At one point, our client left the room to take a call, leaving the two of us alone. The silence was suffocating. I finally broke it. "Ethan." He didn't look up. "Drop it." "No." I pushed the folder aside. "You don't get to shut me out like that." Not after. I stopped myself, realizing too late what I'd almost confessed. His eyes flicked up, sharp. "Not after what?" My throat tightened. "Not after the other night." For a heartbeat, the air between us throbbed with unspoken words. Then he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Right? The almost something in the rain. You ran. Daniel. You always run." The accusation hit deeper than I wanted to admit. He wasn't just talking about that night. He was talking about me whole life. "I didn't run," I said softly. "I stopped myself." "Same thing." "No." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "It's not the same thing at all." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. For a terrifying second, I thought I might cross the table, close the distance, prove my point in the only way that mattered. The client returned, breaking the moment. We spent the rest of the day working in silence, our words clipped and professional. But under the surface, everything was cracking. That evening, I stayed late at the office, staring blankly at my laptop screen. Most of the building had emptied out, the city outside buzzing with nightlife. But I couldn't bring myself to go home. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A knock at my door. "Still here?" Ethan's voice. I looked up. He was leaning in the doorway, tie loosened, hair slightly mussed, as if he'd been running a hand through it in frustration. "Same as you," I muttered. He hesitated, then stepped inside. "Listen." He rubbed the back of his neck. "About earlier. I was an ass." I stared at him. "You think?" A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't know how to do this. With you. It's like, every time I walk into your office, I'm 10 seconds away from either punching you or kissing you. And I don't know which would screw me up more." The words stole my breath. I stood slowly, moving around my desk until I was inches from him. "You're not the only one." His eyes widened. For once, I didn't stop myself. I didn't think. I just reached up, grabbed his tie, and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was months of tension snapping all at once. A collision of teeth and breath and desperation. He froze for half a second, then kissed me back. Harder. One hand fisting in my shirt, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. The kiss was fire. Chaotic. Unpracticed. But so right it terrified me. When we finally broke apart, gasping, foreheads pressed together, Ethan whispered, "Took you long enough." I almost laughed. Almost. But the weight of what we'd done pressed in. The risks. The fallout. "We can't," I started. But he cut me off with another kiss. Softer this time. Like he was daring me to find the strength to resist. And God help me, I didn't. The days that followed blurred into something new. We didn't talk about what had happened. Not really. But suddenly, our rivalry softened. Our banter carried a different edge. One laced with the memory of lips and hands. We'd steal moments passing too close in the hallway, brushing fingers in the copy room, lingering in each other's offices long after everyone else had gone home. It was reckless, addicting, But it was also unsustainable. The firm was competitive, ruthless. Office gossip spread like wildfire. And neither of us could afford the distraction, let alone the scandal of whatever this was becoming. And yet, every time I looked at him, I knew I was already in too deep. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. We were assigned to co-chair a major trial together. High stakes, high visibility, the kind of case that could make or break reputations. We spent weeks preparing, nights in conference rooms, days arguing over strategy. And in those hours, the lines blurred more and more. One evening, exhausted and wired, we found ourselves alone again. He was pacing, gesturing wildly as he outlined his closing argument, passion pouring out of him in every word. I watched him, my chest tightening with something I couldn't name. When he finally stopped, breathless, I said softly, "You're incredible." He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "You. The way you fight. The way you believe in people, even when they don't deserve it. You're incredible." For once, he had no snarky comeback. He just looked at me, eyes wide, vulnerable in a way that stripped me bare. And then he kissed me. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear, just the undeniable truth that whatever this was, it was real. We broke apart only when the cleaning crew entered, and we scrambled apart like guilty teenagers. But the damage was done. We weren't rivals anymore. We were something far more dangerous. But falling for Ethan Carter wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was realizing that, for the first time in my carefully controlled life, I didn't want to win anymore. Not if it meant losing him. The Monday after that second kiss, everything changed. Not outwardly. To anyone else at the firm, Ethan and I were the same sharp-tongued colleagues, occasionally bickering over strategy or tossing barbed jokes in the hallway. But beneath the surface, everything was different. I knew the taste of his mouth, the heat of his hands gripping my shirt, the way his voice broke when he whispered my name like it meant something more. And now, every time I saw him, my body remembered. We were reckless, stupid. We'd brush shoulders in the break room and linger too long. We'd steal minutes in empty conference rooms, lips pressed together in hurried, hungry kisses that ended too soon. Some nights, we worked late just for the excuse to be near each other, the office lights casting shadows across papers we weren't really reading. But as intoxicating as it was also terrifying. The trial we'd been assigned loomed class-era corporate fraud case worth millions. The partners were watching us, evaluating whether we could handle the pressure. This was the kind of case that decided promotions, bonuses, futures. And here I was, jeopardizing all of it for a man who lived to push my buttons. One night, after another grueling prep session, we collapsed side by side on the conference room floor, legal pads scattered around us. Ethan laughed breathlessly. "Tell me again why we didn't go into teaching." "Summer's off. No one cares if your tie is crooked. You'd get fired in a week." I muttered. "You'd argue with the principal on day one." He turned his head toward me, smiling. "Maybe. But at least I wouldn't have to wear a suit every damn day." I looked at him, at the boyish curve of his grin, the faint scar on his jaw I'd never noticed before. My chest ached with something deeper than desire. "Why law, then?" I asked quietly. His smile faltered. He stared at the ceiling for a long time before answering. "Because I wanted to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. My dad used to get screwed over by his employer's construction jobs. No contracts, no benefits. No one cared. I thought maybe I could change that for someone else." The honesty in his voice made my throat tighten. I'd chosen law for stability, prestige, the clean lines of success. But Ethan had chosen it for something nobler. "You're a better man than me," I murmured. He turned his head, eyes locking on mine. "Don't sell yourself short, Daniel. You just hide your heart better." And then he kissed Meslo this time. Tender. Like he wasn't rushing. Like he had all the time in the world. I kissed him back. But in the back of my mind, I wondered how long we could keep pretending this was sustainable. The answer came faster than I expected. 2 weeks before trial, the managing partner, Ms. Caldwell, called me into her office. "Daniel," she said crisply, adjusting her glasses, "we've been impressed with your performance on the Carter case." "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "We're considering you for lead counsel." The words hit like a hammer. Lead counsel. It was everything I'd been working for since I joined the firm. But then she continued. "Of course, that means Carter would be your second. He's talented, but he doesn't have your discipline. He lacks focus." I stiffened. "He's good," I said carefully. She waved a hand. "Good. Yes. But not you. And if you want this case and the recognition that comes with it, you'll need to show me you can control him. Keep him in line." I left her office with my head spinning. Control him. Ethan wasn't someone you controlled. He was fire. Unpredictable. Untamable. It was what made him brilliant and infuriating. But now, my future depended on proving I could eclipse him. That night, when we met to go over exhibits, I couldn't focus. Every time he grinned, every time he leaned close, I thought of Caldwell's words. "Hey," he said finally, frowning. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Fine. Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was trapped between the man I wanted and the career I'd built my life around. And I knew, sooner or later, I'd have to choose. The trial began on a gray Monday morning. The kind of day when the courthouse steps glistened with rain and the air felt heavy with expectation. Ethan and I walked in side by side, suits sharp, briefcases in hand. To the jury, to the opposing counsel, we were a united front. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. In court, Ethan was magnetic. He had the jury leaning forward, hanging on every word. He painted pictures with his arguments, turning dry financial documents into stories of greed and betrayal. And damn it, he was good. Too good. Because while I was precise, calculated, the consummate professional Ethan was alive. And the jury loved him for it. Every compliment he received from the judge, every nod from the jury, twisted in my chest like jealousy and pride tangled together. At night, we'd collapse in the hotel room the firm had booked for us 12 beds. One room. Always one room. Some nights, we stayed on our own sides, the air thick with unspoken tension. Other nights, we didn't. One night, after a particularly brutal cross-examination, I found him sitting on the edge of his bed, head in his hands. "You killed it today," I said softly. He looked up, eyes tired but blazing. "Doesn't feel like it." They kept twisting everything I said. I crossed the room, sat beside him. "That's because they're scared of you. You're too good. They know it." He searched my face, as if trying to see whether I believed it. And then, without a word, he pulled me into his arms. We kissed, slower this time, not desperate but grounding. Like he needed me, like I needed him. After, lying in the dark, I whispered the truth I'd been afraid to admit. "You're better at this than me." He laughed softly, pressing his forehead to mine. "That's the first lie I've ever heard you tell." But it wasn't a lie, and the fear of what that meant gnawed at me long after he fell asleep beside me. Halfway through the trial, the pressure peaked. Opposing counsel blindsided us with a new witness. someone we hadn't prepared for. The courtroom buzzed, and Caldwell shot me a sharp look from the gallery, as if daring me to prove myself. I stood, ready to object, but Ethan placed a hand on my arm. "Let me handle it," he whispered. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. This was my chance to show Caldwell I was in control. But I looked at him, his steady gaze, his quiet confidence, and I nodded. He tore the witness apart. Calm, relentless, brilliant. By the time he sat down, the jury was eating out of his hand. The courtroom buzzed with admiration. Caldwell even clapped me on the shoulder afterward. "Good call, Daniel. You've trained him well." The words made me sick. Trained him. He wasn't my subordinate. He was my equal, maybe even my better. That night, back in the hotel, couldn't hold it in. "Do you realize what you did today? You saved us." He shrugged, grinning. "Team effort." "No," I said firmly. "It was you. All you." For a moment, pride flickered in his eyes. But then he studied me carefully. "Why do I get the feeling that bothers you?" I froze. Because it did. Because every part of me that had clawed its way up this firm hated the idea of being overshadowed. Even by him. Especially by him. I looked away. "It doesn't." But he knew me too well. "Daniel," he said quietly, "if this thing between us is just a distraction, tell me now. Because I can handle losing a case." "I can't handle," he trailed off, voice breaking. My chest constricted. I wanted to tell him the truth, that he wasn't a distraction, that he was the only thing keeping me sane. But the words tangled with fear, with ambition, with everything I'd built my life around. So I said nothing. And the silence was louder than any lie. The trial raged on. But so did the storm inside me. I wanted him. I wanted the case. I wanted it all. But deep down, I knew I couldn't have both. Ethan's words hung in the air like fragile glass. "Look, I didn't mean to drag all this back up. But being around you, here, every day pretending like we're just rivals, it's killing me. I can't do it anymore." His eyes burned with an honesty that made my chest ache. I wanted to look away, to retreat into the safety of sarcasm or professional walls. But instead I felt myself unraveling under the weight of his confession. "You don't get to just drop something like that," I whispered. "Not after everything." He flinched but didn't back down. "Then tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me that every time you see me, your heart doesn't beat faster. Tell me you don't remember." And that was the problem. I did remember. Every kiss. Every stolen night of laughter. Every argument that ended in desperate apologies and softer touches. The past wasn't a ghost, it was a shadow that clung to every corner of this office. That night, couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, staring at the blank canvas leaning against the wall. One I'd been meaning to paint for weeks. My brushes lay untouched. My paints sealed tight. It wasn't just creative block, it was him. Ethan had always been both the muse and the distraction. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. "Mom wants to know if you're coming Sunday for dinner." I typed back quickly, "Not sure yet. Work's crazy." But it wasn't work. It was fear. If I admitted to my family that Ethan was back in my life, even tangentially, I'd have to face their questions, the same ones they asked years ago when I left him. Why did you walk away if you loved him so much? Because love hadn't been enough. Not then. The following morning, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual. His door was open, his tie crooked, his hair damp from a rushed shower. He looked undone, in a way I rarely saw. "You're early," I muttered, trying to keep my voice even. "So are you," he replied, leaning against his doorway. Then he smiled. small and tired. Coffee. Before I could answer, he held out a second cup. The exact way I liked it, with sugars. No cream. I froze. You remember? Of course I do. Felt like the ground shifted beneath us. Subtle but irreversible. I took the cup, my fingers brushing his for just a second too long. That day, our rivalry softened. We still teased. Still competed over who had better taste in wall art. But something had changed. There was a current running beneath every word, every glance. At lunch, he surprised me again. You still paint at night, don't you? How would you know? You've got paint on your cuff. He gestured toward my sleeve. I looked down. Startled was right. I laughed, shaking my head. Caught. Ethan leaned closer, his voice lower. I'd like to see your work again. My chest tightened. That's not a good idea. Maybe not, he admitted. But I want to. Later that week, fate or maybe just bad luck forced us into a project together. The client demanded collaboration, and our boss decided the two most creative minds in the office should handle it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our first late-night session stretched into hours of brainstorming, sketches, and arguments. At one point, Ethan leaned over my shoulder to look at my notes, his breath warm against my ear. My pulse jumped, but I didn't move away. You always overthink the details, he murmured, and you always underestimate them. I shot back, though my voice lacked bite. He chuckled softly. Some things never change. Our eyes met, and for a dangerous moment, the years between us dissolved. It was just him and me again, tangled in old habits and half-buried feelings. The breaking point came a week later. We'd been at the office until midnight, papers and sketches scattered across the desk. I rubbed my temples, exhausted. We're going in circles. Ethan sighed, standing to stretch, his shirt pulled taut across his chest, and I forced myself not to stare. He moved toward the window, gazing out at the city lights. You know, he said quietly, I used to imagine this. Working late nights together, chasing something bigger than ourselves. I swallowed hard. You imagined wrong. He turned then, his expression raw. Did I? The silence between us was unbearable. I shoved back my chair, pacing the room. You don't get it. Being with you cost me everything. My family, my focus, my future. I can't go back to that. Ethan's jaw tightened. You didn't lose those things because of me. You lost them because you were scared. My chest burned. Don't. Yes. He pressed, stepping closer. You ran. Not because we didn't fit, but because you couldn't stand how much you wanted it. How much you wanted me. I froze. His words cut too close to the truth. He reached out then, fingers brushing mine. Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll stop. I'll never bring it up again. But I couldn't. My silence was the only answer he needed. That night, I dreamed of him. Not the man standing in the office next door, but the boy I first fell in love with, carefree, reckless, smiling like the world belonged to him. I woke with tears in my eyes and paint smudged on my hands, though I didn't remember picking up a brush. When I finally looked at the canvas the next morning, I realized what I had painted, his face. Our project neared completion, and the closer we got, the more impossible it became to deny the gravity pulling us back together. We still argued, still clashed over creative choices. But beneath it all there was something else, something neither of us wanted to name. One evening, after another marathon session, Ethan lingered by my desk. Come with me, he said. Where? You'll see. Against my better judgment, I followed him. We ended up at a small, dimly lit diner a few blocks away. The kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. We slid into a booth. The vinyl seats cracked from years of use. Ethan ordered pie and coffee for both of us, like he had 100 times before. "You're impossible," I muttered, but I couldn't stop the smile tugging at my lips. He grinned. "And you love it." I looked at him then, really looked, and the truth hit me harder than I wanted. He was right. The diner became our quiet ritual. Once a week, sometimes twice, Ethan and I found ourselves there, slipping into the booth like no time had passed at all. First, we filled the air with small talk, complaints about deadlines, debates over which artist deserved more recognition, sarcastic jabs about who had the better sense of humor. But eventually, the conversations dug deeper, unraveling old wounds and unspoken truths. One night, Ethan stirred his coffee absently, his gaze fixed on the window. "You know, I used to wait for you. After you left, I thought maybe you'd come back once you realized we were worth fighting for." I swallowed, guilt heavy in my throat. I almost did, more than once. But every time I got close, I thought about how broken we'd been, about the way we burned each other out. He turned then, his eyes sharp but soft. Maybe we weren't broken. Maybe we were just unfinished. The words sank into me, unsettling and comforting all at once. Weeks turned into months. Our project launched to thunderous success. Clients praising our creativity and chemistry. The office buzzed with talk of how unstoppable we were as a team. But when the applause faded and the lights dimmed, I still lay awake at night, caught between fear and longing. I wanted him, God. I still wanted him, but the thought of falling apart again terrified me. One Friday evening, as the office emptied out, Ethan appeared at my doorway. He leaned against the frame casually, but there was a tension in his posture, like a man bracing himself for impact. "Come to my place tonight," he said simply. I blinked. "Ethan, no excuses, no deflections. Just come, please." My pulse quickened. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut, pretend I hadn't heard. But another part, the louder, braver part, wanted to see where this would go. So I went. His apartment was warm, filled with soft light and the faint scent of paint and coffee. Canvases lined the walls, some finished, some half-started, all pulsing with color and life. "This is what you've been working on," I murmured, stepping closer to a painting of the city skyline at dusk. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It keeps me sane." I turned to face him. He stood in the middle of the room, watching me with a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "Why did you want me here?" I asked. "Because I can't keep pretending." He took a step closer, then another. "I still love you. I never stopped." The words hit like a storm breaking over me. My chest ached. My hands shook. I wanted to run, but I also wanted to stay, to collapse into him and let the years of distance shatter. Instead, I whispered, "You're going to ruin me again. Or maybe I'll save you." His hand brushed mine, tentative but certain. "But you've got to let me try." The kiss came like gravity, inevitable, unstoppable. His lips were familiar and foreign all at once. A map I thought I'd lost but still knew by heart. The dam broke. Years of longing, regret, and buried love poured out in the heat of his touch, the urgency of his breath. My hands tangled in his shirt. His arms wrapped around me like he'd never let go again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. Morning light crept through the blinds, spilling across tangled sheets. Ethan lay beside me, his arm draped over my waist, his breath steady against the back of my neck. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, felt like peace. Still, doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. Could we really make it work this time? Or were we destined to repeat the same mistakes? As if sensing my thoughts, Ethan stirred. His voice was husky with sleep. Stop overthinking. Just be here. With me. I smiled faintly. You always did know how to read me. And you always made it harder than it had to be. He kissed my shoulder softly. Let's not do that this time. Of course, life wasn't suddenly perfect. My family still asked questions I didn't want to answer. Our coworkers noticed the shift between us, whispering about how close we'd become. Old insecurities bubbled up, threatening to pull me back into my shell. But Ethan was patient. When I panicked, he stayed. When I lashed out, he listened. When I doubted, he reminded me with quiet consistency. He wasn't leaving. One evening, after a particularly rough call with my mom, I found myself pacing his living room. She'll never accept this. She'll never accept you. Ethan set down his brush and crossed the room, pulling me into his arms. Then she doesn't get to decide our happiness. Only we do. His certainty anchored me, steadied me, and slowly, I began to believe it too. The turning point came one Sunday afternoon. I finally agreed to bring Ethan to a family dinner. The tension was suffocating at first. Awkward silences, sidelong glances, polite but clipped questions. But Ethan was his usual self, charming, thoughtful, effortlessly disarming. By the end of the night, my sister was laughing at his stories, and even my mom softened, though she tried to hide it. When we left, Ethan squeezed my hand. Told you it wouldn't be the end of the world. I exhaled, a weight lifting off my shoulders. Maybe you were right. He smirked. I usually am. Months passed, and what once felt fragile grew strong. We built routines together: morning coffee, late-night painting, shared playlists on long drives. The office rivalry that started it all became a running joke. Our walls now adorned with art we created together. One evening, as we stood in front of a new canvas, Ethan turned to me with a mischievous grin. Remember how this started? You and me, trying to outdo each other with wall art. I laughed. Of course. You were insufferable. And now? He asked, stepping closer, his voice warm. Now, I said softly, resting my forehead against his. I wouldn't change a thing. The story didn't end with a grand gesture or a dramatic declaration. It ended quietly, in the steady rhythm of two hearts learning to beat in sync again. Because love, I realized, wasn't about fireworks or flawless moments. It was about choosing each other over and over, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. And as I looked at Ethan, standing beside me in the glow of our shared life, I knew this time I wouldn't run. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.